Hi, my name's Rebecca, and I'm here to teach you all the things that you did not learn from your piano teacher growing up. I took piano for many years, but one thing that I never learned was how to sit down at the piano and just make beautiful music. And so I had to kind of teach myself that skill, and I realized that it's a skill that's lacking for a lot of musicians. One of the things that really helps us to be able to make beautiful music when we sit down is to understand some chord progressions. So one of the things that I do in my studio and on my channel, I teach some popular and beautiful chord progressions. And once you know those, they can translate into any key. If playing without music in front of you and wanting to make beautiful music all the time, every time you sit down, is something that interests you, I hope that you will consider subscribing, sharing my videos, commenting. All of that helps me out. A lot of times, beginners think that they have to just always play in the key of C major. C major is a great key because it's one of the easiest. It's playing between C and C and playing only the white notes, not having to worry about sharps and flats, and that does make things a little bit easier. But it gets kind of boring too. Make sure to check out my playlist for the Circle of Fifths, where we're starting at C major, but we're going clockwise and counterclockwise through the Circle of Fifths to all of the different major keys on the piano. So eventually we'll hit them all, and you will feel your confidence rise as you learn to play in all of these different keys. But I want to add something else, and that is learning to play in some minor keys. Minor keys are so beautiful because they just have a different sound to them. Sometimes they can sound melancholic, or they can sound sad. Sometimes they can sound scary. So it's just a different sound for the piano. So the chord progression that we're going to do today uses a few of the different chords in the key of A minor. The reason we're starting in A minor is because it is a relative to C major. So it's really cool that there are no sharps and flats in the natural mode of A minor, which is what we're going to do today. And we're just playing white notes, but instead of starting on C, we're starting on A. So let's talk about, first of all, how to find A minor, how that is related to C major, so you understand the theory behind it. But then I'm going to show you exactly what to do to improvise in this really cool key. So we hit a C, and we know that in C major, there are no sharps and flats. So if we're doing this scale, we're starting on C and ending on C. But to find the equivalent minor key, we're going to go down 3 notes, no matter what those notes are. That's called a half step. If you go to the very next note, black or white, of whatever note you're on, that's a half step. So we're going down 3 half steps to find out what our relative minor to C major is. So we start here on C, we go 1, 2, and 3, and we get to an A. So now we know that just like the key of C major, there are no sharps or flats in the key of A minor, but instead of starting on a C, we start on the A. So listen to the difference. One thing that I did want to mention is that the A minor scale that we just played between A and A is the natural minor. There are actually 3 different modes for a minor key, and the natural minor is exactly the same key signature as the relative major. So C major is no black notes. A minor is also no black notes. However, I want to mention the other 2 modes just so that you are aware of what they are, and you do see them in some chord progressions in minor keys. The first one is called the harmonic minor, and that's where we take the 7th of the scale and we're going to raise it by a half step. Remember that raising a note means that we're going to the right of a note, and a half step just means that we are taking a note and we're playing, instead of that note, whatever note is just directly to the right of that note, whether it is black or white. So let's start on A and count up 7 notes of the scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that is a G. So instead of playing a G, we're going to play a half step to the right And that is this note right here, which is a G sharp. So we're going to skip the G and play a G sharp. So here's what a harmonic minor sounds like in the key of A minor. And then we go back down. So if in your chord progressions you see some G sharps, that's where they're coming from. The other one is less used. However, it is still used sometimes and it is worth mentioning, and that is called the melodic minor. So that is where you take the 6 and 7 of the scale, and on the way up of the scale, you raise them a half step this way. But then on the way down, you make it natural. Let's count up and find our 6th and 7th notes and figure out what the notes are before we play this scale, and then I'll show you what that scale sounds like. So the natural minor, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So instead of the F, we're going to play F sharp. And then the 7th note is a G, and instead of the G, we're going to play a G sharp. So that's on the way up, but then coming back down, we're going to make them natural again. So it sounds like this. And then coming back down natural. Sometimes you will see an F sharp or a G sharp written in music in the key of A minor. That's where that comes from. But for today, we are not using any black notes in our improvisation. We're going to use the A natural minor or the Aeolian minor from A to A, only white notes. Now that we know the scale that we are using, which is our A natural minor, we're going to use our left hand because that's what's going to be forming our chords today. And we're going to make chords based on the scale. So for each one of the notes in the scale, we're going to build a triad on top of it. A triad is a stacked chord. So to find the first triad, and we won't go through this for every single one, but just for the first one, we're going to start with an A. And we're going to go up 3 notes in the key of A minor. 1, 2, 3. That leads us to a C. So we have A and C. And then from the first note, we're going to go up 5. And that leads us to an E. So our first triad, or our tonic triad, is A, C, E. That pattern, that stacked pattern, is what we're going to start with right now so that we can see the different notes in the key of A minor. Your first chord is a minor chord, and that is A, C, E. The next one, number 2 chord, is a diminished chord, and that is B diminished, B, D, F. Number 3 is a major chord, C major. Number 4 is a minor chord, D minor. Number 5 is a minor chord, an E minor. Number 6 is major, F major. Number 7 is major, and that is a G major. And then we're back to A minor. So we're keeping that same pattern all the way through. Now let's talk about making a melody in the right hand. So to make a melody to start out, we are going to be playing between an A and an A. Just to begin, we want to make sure that we stay within the octave. And just a note about melodies, we don't want our melodies to be jumping around too far. Listen to what happens if I make a melody that jumps too far out of the octave in between each one. It doesn't make sense to the ear. It would sound something like this. It's almost too much for your ear to process because nothing was contained. So in your melody, you want to keep the notes kind of close, and you want to set a range. So our range is going to be between A and A. So I'm going to stick right in this range. And then when I begin the melody and end the melody, I want it to begin and end on an A. That will help our ear to know that we have come home. That's the key that we're playing in. So our melody can sound something like this. And you can just play around with it and see if you like something. If you like it, see if you can remember it. Otherwise, it's just good practice to hear the key that you are in. So now we're going to look at our chord progression, and I'm going to keep them right now in this stacked pattern. And then we'll talk about inversions and things like that in a little bit. So our first chord is our A minor, which is our 1 chord, A, C, E. Then we're going to go to our major 6 chord. So from A, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that brings us to an F. So I'm going to pop down to this F, and we're going to build the triad on the F. F, A, and C. Then we're going to go to our 3 chords. So from A, 1, 2, 3, that leads us to C, and that is C, E, G. So we have, so far, we have 1, 6, 3, and then we have 2 more. The next one is a 7, a major 7 chord. So let's go from A and count to 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That is a G chord. I'll do it down here. G, B, and D. And then we're back to our 1 chord. So let's now look at, again, the stacked pattern of our chords. So we have 1, 6, 3, 7, 1. So now we're going to put a little melody in our right hand while we're doing just the stacked chords in our left hand. Okay, so remember what we talked about our melody staying kind of close, not being just popping everywhere. So we're going to stay between this A and this A. I'm going to use my pedal, and it's still not going to sound wonderful yet because this is just a very basic, but this is how I begin to understand the chord progression. All right, so we're going to do 1 beat with our chord in our left hand, and then 3 beats with a little melody in my right hand. Let's try this. Now you'll notice that my melody that time ended on a C. It didn't end on an A. But the reason that's okay is because I have a 1 chord down in my left hand. So our ear hears the A in your left hand, and that helps it to come home in your right hand. So either way, you can always end on an A if you like to, or you don't have to, and just make sure that you end on your 1 chord in your left hand. So once you've understood that, let's talk about what we're going to do now with our left hand. So what I want you to try is to represent the chords in your left hand with an octave. So we'll start out with our left hand doing an A. This is representative of our A minor. And then I'm going to put one other note down. So we're going to ignore, so our notes are A, C, E, and then A. But instead of hitting all of those notes, to make it easier, we're going to take out the third, which is the C. And we're going to just have A, E, and then followed by an A. So you can either play this all together, or you can arpeggiate it, which means that you just play them individually. All right, so let's look at what our representation for all of these chords are going to be. So we have our 1 chord, then our 6 chord, and that's F with a C in the middle. And then we're doing C with a G in the middle. And then G with a D in the middle. And then our A again. So that's what our hand is going to be doing in the left. So I would practice over and over again until you become comfortable with that pattern. A minor, F, C, G, A minor. Then we are going to now start adding things in our right hand. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just create a little pattern with only 1 note and doing a little melody in my right hand while I'm doing these representation chords. That's our next step, and then we're going to fill it out in the right hand. So let's try something where we're just doing a melody over here. again, improvisation is all about your own decisions and your own creativity. So if you didn't love what you just did, try it again. There is nothing wrong with that. Now we're going to talk about how to fill things out in your right hand a little bit. So there's two different ways that we can do this. We can make up a melody and then remember the melody and try to add notes that go with it, but that seems a little bit more confusing. So what I like to do is to think of inversions in my right hand. All inversions is a fancy word to say that you get to play a chord and you get to pick what order of notes that you want to play that chord in. So let's, for example, look at A minor. So we have A, C, E. We could take the A off the bottom and put it at the top. We could take the C off the bottom and put it at the top, or then back to our stacked chord. Any one of those is an A minor. They do sound slightly different. Listen. They all sound slightly different, but they sound the same too. So any of those will work. So we're going to start with our one chord stacked. Then our next chord is an F chord, and our notes for the F chord are F, A, and C. So if you see in my A minor chord, I already have an A and a C down. I just need to add an F. So we can do one of two things. We can do this and then put the F on the bottom. But what I think would be better is to move this E up here. So your hand doesn't move very much, but it still switches chords. So we're going to do that. And remember, this is just one option of what you get to decide. I'm going to show you my choices right now. If you decide on something else, then more power to you. That is wonderful. You get to decide. You don't have to copy me, but you can if you want to. All right, so we have A minor to our F chord. And then we have a C chord. C is C, E, and G. So I've got an E right here that I'm going to put down because it's real close. And we have a C down already, and we just have to move our thumb to this G. See that? All right, so we have A minor, F, C, and then we're going to go to our G chord, G, B, D. So we've got G already. And B and D are real close, so let's just move this down. And then we're just back to our one chord, which is A minor, A, C, E. All right, so let's look at that whole thing and what we're going to do with our right hand before we put our left hand to it. All right, we have our A minor, F, C, G, okay, so now we add our left hand to it. And then F, C, A minor. So now I'm going to put some rhythm in my left hand. And that time I only did the octave. I didn't add the fifth in there. So you can do whatever you want, which is fine. This time I'm going to do arpeggios over here in my left hand, and then in my right hand I'm going to try to arpeggiate also, and let's see what happens. But the same exact pattern though, I'm just adding rhythm. Now that we have that down and we understand what the arpeggios are, we're now going to go into the next step, which is slightly more advanced, but it builds on this idea of inversions and patterns and notes in the right hand and the left hand. So our last step is that we are going to now start adding in some movement in our right hand. So this is the time when you really get to let your creativity shine, and you can even go outside of the octave, between here and here and between here and here, as long as the melody notes are not popping around like that. If we can kind of keep the melody close by each other so that it makes sense to our ears, it's going to be a lot better. So this is something that when you start adding these notes and passing tones, then it creates more of a musical sound in your ear. So what exactly is a passing tone? What a passing tone is a note that you literally pass by on the way to the next note. So let me give you an example. So if we're starting out with our A minor, and then I move like that, I'm passing by notes to get to our next chord, and that has added some extra elements in there. All right, so let's give this a try. And again, when you do this, your song is going to be totally different than mine, which is why I love it. And also, if you came back the next day and you were to do this chord progression again, chances are you would not play exactly the same thing that you played yesterday. So it literally allows you to be as creative as you want to in any given time. So let's try this out and see what kind of a tune that we can create right now. Let me know in the comments below if this is your first time playing in a minor key. It is really addicting. I think you're going to love it. And some of the chord progressions that I'm going to be sharing in upcoming videos are in minor keys. But rest assured, we are not going to only stick with A minor. I just started here because it's less intimidating than some of the other minor keys. But really, they all work together and they're all really fun. So have fun with this. Let me know how I can help and have fun practicing.